after I went in the war and so on, I lost contact with them essentially. Uh,
How about your brother?
oh, uh, my parents had two of us, my brother Bill and myself, and he was the oldest. I was the youngest, and
11 months apart.
he was just like you two. One, he used to push me around.
You hear that, Bill?
And we were also like you. We were inseparable. And one day,
Diphtheria. He got diphtheria.
Is that contagious?
They had a.
one day he became ill. He got diphtheria and scarlet fever. We were living with my grandparents over in Connellsville, and one day they came and they put a big red sign on the front of our house, and I found out that I was
Contagious.
not allowed to get off the porch or leave the house, and nobody could come visit us because we were quarantined. And that's how they tried to deal with these diseases, which were very serious in those days, because they had no way of fighting it. And for example, if you got pneumonia, it was a sign you were going to die, because very few people survived pneumonia. So that's why the average age was so much smaller then than it is now. So he died just before Christmas.
How old was he?
He was 7.
He was 7?
He was 7, huh? They were only 11 months apart. Yeah.
That's close.
And they got into all kinds of bad little things.
He was a character. One, for example, my mother bought eggs. She started fixing hair, a hairdresser in her home. She invited people, and she made money for the family that way.
I didn't know that.
And she was out working on somebody, and they delivered 2 dozen eggs in a bag to our house, and they were in the kitchen. And my brother was a heller, I gotta say it. And he took the eggs and he smashed them on the floor, and we skated on them.
Oh, jeez.
My mother came in. Our mother came in, and she found what we had done. And I really felt, I remember to this very day, I thought she was going to kill us, but she didn't.
I would have killed her.
So when we went to live with my grandparents, and he subsequently died there just before Christmas, and my mother really never got over it.
Jim, don't forget talking about, he was a little paramaniac. He loved.
That's where Bill got it then.
He was. That's why I had to burn Bill's finger.
My father caught him trying to burn the house down.
For real?
He going underneath the porch.
We were in a
latch
wooden
work.
house, and we had stairs, raised stairs, and he and I used to use the landing underneath the landing as our little work play area, you know. And we were playing there, and he got the idea to build a fire. He built a fire, and it was going like 60. And my dad, God was watching us. My dad came home from work at that time, and caught the fire and got the fire out. And I thought he was going to. I was guilty because I happened to be there, but I thought he was going to give us. I thought he was going to lynch us.
Well, we were that stupid.
He loved to see flames.
So that's the story of my brother. And goodness knows where he'd have been after if he hadn't contracted that disease. But anyway, my dad got a job through my grandfather. My grandfather got him a job working in these machine shops in one of the mines. All the big mines had locomotives. They're getting coal in, out of the mines, and so on. So he worked in the machine shop there, and that was he had that job. And he bragged to me one day during the Depression. He lived in Fairmont, West Virginia, and he bragged to me that he was making $35 a week.
Wow.
And that allowed us to get a car. So it goes to show you how far $35 would go in those days.
What does a machinist do?
Machine? They made in his case they made parts for locomotives.
They like would
If
hand
they
make.
break down, they'd make another part. And
I just wondered about that.
he was always reading books, and he had a library of books on math and machines, and he worked himself up to the point where when we left West Virginia during the war, it was Roosevelt came in and he was getting the country ready for war, and so he. The word went out. There were jobs down there for people who had technical ability, and so my dad went down and worked in the technical shops in the Navy Yard down in Washington D.C. And one thing led to another. He became head of that, and then the technical shops moved on out. If you'll remember, they had the space flights. Of the V2s.
Yeah.
Well, von Braun and the other German scientists came on out, and some of them were located with where my dad was out in White Oak, Maryland, at a Naval Ordnance Laboratory.
I didn't know that.
So Dad got out there, and he was running the technical shops and making all kind of technical things. He went all over the world buying. Special pieces of equipment, like in Switzerland or where have you.
Really?
So that they could make the parts for these guys, and
For von Braun?
That is amazing. I mean, he's.
Did you ever meet him?
pardon?
Did you ever meet von Braun?
The closest I got to the man was he gave a lecture, and I sat in on the
You
lecture.
saw him speak?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Then I went down, when I left there and went to NASA, I went down to Redstone. I went to all the facilities that NASA had, and so I got to see, I never met him down there though, but I got to see them putting together the Saturn
Wow.
launch. Anyway, and I also got to see the early launches down on the Cape. I would go down there for that.
Mm.
So anyway, my dad worked there until he retired, and then they came down to Pinellas Park in Florida, which was just north of Clearwater, and bought a home. And my grandparents, the Kniffs, they put my Kniffs in that home before they retired, before my dad retired.
They paid on
And they lived there for several years. And then my parents came down and lived with them in the same place. So they were all together until my grandparents died. And my grandfather died at 87, I think he was when he died.
And he drove across country when he was
Yeah.
85,
Wow.
Yeah, he was.
California.
Now you have to remember
Awesome.
driving across country in the early 50s
Wow.
was an experience because there were no. You say Eisenhower developed the highway system, and he went out there when it was only Route 66 and that sort of thing.
Wow.
That would have been cool though to see Route 66 in its heyday.
Lincoln
And
Highway.
Grandma didn't drive, so he did all the driving.
Yeah, he did everything. So my parents went down, retired down there, and my father died. I was on a job by that time I'd gone to work for the Postal Service and opening a management academy out in Potomac, and whenever I could, or when I'd ever travel, I'd always deviate and go on down and visit my parents in Florida. So we got to see them, and my grandfather died at 86 of a heart attack, and the last time I saw my dad, I deviated on a trip for NASA for the Postal Service, and went on down, and we put our clubs out in the living room so we could go play golf the next morning. My Uncle Puss was there, by the way, so Uncle Puss and Dad and I were and my mother had a get together there, and my dad got up in the middle of the night, and he was sick at the stomach and throwing up and in really bad shape. We got him on over to the hospital, and he died in the hospital of a heart attack. So
They didn't have all the great stuff they have
so
now.
my mother
Yeah.
lived down in that home for several years until she died, and
For 10 years.
Steve and your mother and I went down to see what we were going to do with the facility. So we consequently sold the house, and we used that money to build and we bought a condo on the beach at Clearwater, and that turned
Cute.
out to be not a great idea, because civilization came along, and you had trouble getting across the highway to get to the beach. So we decided we were going to live down in gorgeous Cape Coral, Florida, and that's where your mother and I are now. Dorothy is, as I said, is in Albuquerque, and she is about the only relative we have
She
that
is.
we have contact with. My Aunt Teresa's girls were on up in Pennsylvania, but things did not go at all well with them, and we lost contact with them.
End of story.
All right, now, where do we leave off?
Cousin Marie,
At the end.
who he called
No.
Aunt Marie, and she's not an aunt.
All right, let's hear the scandalous story.
It's not a scandal.
Well,
If it's
I
not a
think-
scandal, then it's no good.
Yeah, see if you can jazz it up a bit.
You want me to tell the story?
we can just surmise, but
No, it's not surmising, Grandma.
All right, Mom is telling us the story. Here, I have to come over here and get your pretty side. And you can feel free to correct her. All right, hit it, Mom.
Steve, Bill, no, Jim had a relative that he always called Aunt Marie. Aunt Marie. And Aunt Marie was supposed to be his mother's sister.
Right,
Kitty was his mother.
right.
Okay. And then, what was Kitty's sister's name?
Teresa.
Teresa. So there's supposed to have been 3 daughters. But I understand from Grandma Reese that years ago, Teresa was not married at the time. She got pregnant. And back in those days, it was kind of a scandalous thing to be unmarried and suddenly have a baby. So Grandma Kniff, Teresa's mother, was a very large, very, very large lady. So I don't think she left town, but whatever. When the baby was born, she claimed that it was her child. And it was really her grandchild, because it was Teresa's baby.
Oh.
So I'm sure that Kitty, his mother, as she got older, she must have known. But Marie always thought that Grandma Kniff was her mother. So it made her.
How did they sell that? I look at age differences. I have to do it on paper.
Well,
Yeah, what kind of spin you put on that?
well, it could have, she was just I think she was just probably 16 or 17. She was just a young
Teen pregnancy.
girl. And so, and they raised her as a very strict little Catholic girl.
That's nice. All right, so is that true?
I deny everything.
Well,
You won't put it on film, huh?
well, it was really nothing.
She and I were very close, and we grew up together.
That's nice.
She was a few years older than I,
Not much.
and she's a very bright girl. Very bright girl. Did very well in school. She went out to California,
Modesto.
and pardon me?
It was Modesto he lived in.
Yeah, and she came to visit us from California, and that was the last time we saw her. But she married, had a very happy family.